heard that.
Yep. So, and then I think that the baby named Ida was Minnie's and Billy's, because Billy was not in the census with them. He'd already come out to Washington State. And then something happened to Annie. And so Minnie took the kids and headed to Washington State. So we don't know what happened to Annie. And we don't know, we know that all of the Browns went to the Seattle area first. And then they came over to Okanagan shortly after they opened it up for homesteading. So, and remember there was that little story that said that some people thought that Billy and Minnie had a little girl, and that when she ran off, Billy took the little girl and floated down the river and left her with relatives to raise. That's
I didn't ever hear that part of it. That she was on the thing that I had heard was that he took her up into I won't be able to tell you.
Are you talking about Billy?
I'm talking about Billy took Ida, the baby,
Okay.
up into above Wenatchee
Okay.
and left her there.
That would be the same thing that supposedly Mom said.
But she wouldn't have been on
That Billy was supposed to have taken the baby and gotten on a raft and gone down the river to the Wenatchee area. They didn't say the Wenatchee area. They said.
Okay.
They said, it's escaping my.
That would kind of make more sense because he would have had all three of them at the same time.
Except that he
and
left.
And then he decided to take the baby to his relatives.
Right, because the boys weren't his relatives. He just left them there.
Right.
And Grandpa was probably old enough by the time he decided to do that. Before 1910, he took Ida to some family members somewhere else. And because in 1910 he was living with his brothers back in Okanagan County. I found him in the census there, but not with the baby girl. And Grandpa in 1910 would have been about 15 years old. So if Billy left when Grandpa was about 12 or 13, they probably would have had the attitude that says, well, you're big enough to take care of yourself now. And just went off and kind of left them to fend for themselves.
I had no idea they were that old.
Yeah, I always got the impression that they were a lot smaller than that. But by the time Minnie left, Grandpa would have been probably about 10 years old or a little older.
If he went to school in Riverside in the 3rd grade, he was not 15.
No. But he and Grandpa he and Uncle Dell lived with two different families. They started out with the Coopers at the hotel there. And he stayed with the Coopers for a while. And Uncle Dell went and lived with another family, kind of like on that Riverside Cutoff Road area, heading up towards Conconelli. And then when Grandpa got in trouble over that ring when he went to reform school, he was up in Conconelli just living from hand to mouth, whatever jobs he could get.
See, Mother danced with him in Loomis.
Oh, is that right?
And that's the Conconelli area.
Okay. And when I stopped in Okanagan and went to the Historical Society, and I was telling the guys in there about the story, and I mentioned the reform thing and how Grandpa had gotten arrested, he found the newspaper articles, and when he saw the name of the guy that had accused him,
everywhere for that newspaper.
Well,
article.
I think I meant to send you a copy of it. If I didn't, I'll send you one.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
So anyway, when the guy in the Historical Society saw the name of the guy that Grandpa had been accused, Grandpa had been working for this guy.
McLean.
Yes, and the guy in the Historical Society says, boy, do I know that name. He says that the man apparently and his family had a reputation And there were some legal things that went on. It's kind of like maybe they always kind of fought with their neighbors, kind of maybe they were instigators and maybe not necessarily the most honest and upright kind of people. So, and Grandpa said that the reason he did that was because he'd worked for McLean and he hadn't gotten paid, so he broke in and stole that ring because he needed something to live on.
You know what's funny? I went to school with Cora McLean, who came out of Loomis.
Is that right?
And she's gone. Wouldn't that have been something if I'd have known?
Yeah.
She was the granddaughter
Yes.
of that guy.
It's probably a good thing you didn't know. You guys might have been enemies.
So Vicki, I didn't start recording this until you started in. So basically, go a little bit into about the Majors when they did the census. You said Annie Majors had married.
In the 1900 census, when the census taker came around, Annie was had been married to a man named John Majors, and she's listed in the census as a widow. So he died within a year after they got married, and either she gave the last name of Majors as the name of everybody in the household to the census taker, or he just assumed their last name was Majors because she had said that's what hers was. So,
and then there were 12 kids,
Yes.
5 living,
One-
and Minnie was the sister to Uncle Del and Grandpa.
yes.
Okay, so that's the part that I missed with the recording. So I was
Okay.
just kind of, and then Bill, and you figure that Minnie, when Ann died, took the 2 boys and the baby, who probably was Billy's and Minnie's daughter,
Yes.
Ida, instead of Annie Majors, and they went off
To Washington.
to Washington State.
Yes. And I'm pretty sure they probably traveled by train, not wagon train. The story was always that they came out on one of the last wagon trains with all of the Brown family, all of those different ones that we knew. But when you research those families' histories, they came to the Okanagan country from different parts of the country at different times.
Dad remembered camping on the Missouri River.
Okay, so they might have traveled part of the way by wagon and then caught the train to go the rest of the way. But there was
He
the
always
railroad.
said that he was on a wagon train.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and
that,
it very well could be.
Yeah,
it very
so
well could be.
kinda
and he could be remember hiding.
With such a little.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
and who knows, maybe I'm guessing that they came by railroad because Jefferson City, Missouri, which was just across the Missouri River from Fulton, Callaway County, was kind of a major hub in Missouri, and there were, when you look at a railroad map, there were all kinds of tracks that came in and out of there. So it would have probably been common to take a train, but if they didn't have much money and couldn't afford a railroad ticket, they might have had a wagon. Maybe their mom had a wagon. And we don't even know for sure that she died in like 1901. She could have just gotten sick and been hospitalized, because there were Jefferson City and that area was also where they built all of the mental institutions for men and women, as well as the prisons. So when you look through the census, there's a lot of people listed, and you can find a name that looks familiar, but those institutions didn't know anything about them. And sometimes they didn't even know for sure their age.
I thought was
So-
kind of, how would they have had a place to live if they hadn't have had the wagon to live in when they got to Siwash Creek? They
Well,
wouldn't have. Those 2 would never build a house.
first they went to Seattle and they worked in the shipyards. Billy and his brothers worked in Seattle in the shipyards for a while before they came to Okanagan County.
Well, I didn't think Billy went with them.
He came about the same time or a little bit after, because he was down in Jefferson City, Missouri. That's where he married Minnie at. And then he probably decided to head on for Washington, and he either went back up to Illinois, which where his folks were living wasn't but a few counties away from where he met Minnie. So he either followed them out, or he went back up and went out with them to the Seattle area. And then Minnie, I'm pretty sure, came later because she was still in the census without him.
Boy, that sure throws the story all
Yeah.
All of the stories
And the same thing
that
with mine,
everybody
too.
Told
completely.
over the years, there's parallels, but it just kind of clarifies it a little bit. It wasn't quite the way Grandpa remembered it, and what popped into my head there while we were talking was maybe Minnie and the kids came by railroad train out to Seattle, but then maybe from Seattle to Okanagan they came by wagon train. And maybe that's what Grandpa, I mean, anything's possible. There's so many options, and with nobody to ask,
Yeah.
unless we stumble across something just totally by accident,
And
we'll probably never know.
And one of with Mom, the main theory that they had for a while at least was that possibly Minnie and Billy were not married, and that because they couldn't get anybody really to talk about them, that they ran across with the wagon train. So they thought that maybe Minnie was a scarlet woman of some kind or something like that. And I remember that, and that Grandpa remembers being pulled out from underneath the porch to go onto the
That
wagon
would
train.
also
So you never know.
clarify the fact that those people on Siwash Creek knew nothing about.
Yeah, well,
They weren't on the wagon train with them.
right. Yes, that's exactly right.
That was
And Billy Brown's mother and two of his brothers homesteaded up on Siwash Creek, as did Billy. I found his homestead application. And he homesteaded right next to them, but I think they built one family home.
Dad knew that area so well.
And
it
that
just
he probably lived out
had
there
to
with
have-
Billy and Minnie until she took off. So it's no wonder he probably ran wild over the hillside along with
pretty little.
working out there.
There's not much hillside there.
Well, yeah, figure of
He
speech.
might have walked in the creek a little
Yes,
bit.
yeah.
Maybe-
Dangled his toes after the crawdaddies, yeah. So I just think it's just fascinating, and I'm thinking that somewhere with the DNA that we'll find somebody else who's connected to either Grandpa's dad or his mom. And it might not be real close. It might be 2 generations back, and we'll have to spend a little bit of time.
I would like to, I don't really believe that Uncle Dale and Dad had the same father.
Interesting that you should say that.
I've always said that.
Interesting that you should say that. This is what I observed by looking at the census and those marriage records. When Minnie Anderson got married to Billy Brown, she was a minor, so her mom had to sign on the marriage application. That's how we found out her name was Annie Majors, so that we could start looking. And then we found the marriage record of Mrs. Annie Anderson to John Majors. She was married to him just a little bit before. She was married to him in November of 1898. And Uncle Dell was born in February of 1899. So you got December, January, February, 3 or 4 months he was born after Annie married John Majors. So I'm going.
So Dell probably was a
So
major.
is Uncle Dell really a Majors? Maybe his dad was John Majors.
I often thought that he is so dark that he was an Indian, had an Indian father.
Well, there was some families there that had the last name of Majors, but we just can't find the right one. And Missouri did such a terrible job of keeping their local records. If you find something, Levana finding those two marriage records was just almost miraculous that we were, because there's so many records that are missing. So yeah, it's just, you know, I want to dig
it was a
more.
poor area.
Yeah.
And that probably has something to do with it.
Yeah, and in the 1900 census, Annie they asked you whether you owned your farm, whether you lived on a farm or in town, whether you lived in a place you owned or if you were renting it. And she put down that she was renting. So, and based on the precinct designation on the census, there was some description stuff on there that shows me that they lived somewhere south of Fulton towards the Missouri River, maybe kind of halfway between Fulton and the Missouri River, but I don't know if we'll ever be able to find out.
You don't know if the Browns were part Indian.
No, if they were, it's not in their immediate history because they were settled in that county in Illinois for 2 or 3 generations before they started
Browns
moving
were.
west.
And with Uncle Dell, it would have been Majors that he would have gotten the Indian from rather than Bailey Brown.
Yeah. Right.
Majors is who we think probably was Uncle Dell's father.
And since Uncle Dell doesn't have any kids, there is no
Yeah, if we'd had
ancestry thing
yeah.
that can be done to do a comparison.
No, but just to look at the
Yeah.
two, that's one
Yeah.
reason I brought that out.
Right.
Because they're so different.
Unless he looks like his mother, which is entirely possible. We know nothing about her also.
Yeah, look at Alice and I. Well, I guess we do look.
We're starting to vibrate.
there's no Indian
But
in our
the
ancestry.
way we look alike is the Drew
Mm.
way, not the, and, well, I don't know if the Anderson.
People
That's
were
not
Right.
your dad.
Right.
People were her mother.